bioethics. Today is a special way, a webinar, because we are going to be focusing on World Bioethics Day. As you all know, World Bioethics Day reflects the day the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights came into fact on at the 33rd General Assembly of the UNESCO, and this was on the 19th of October 2005. And so we have the 19th of October every year as the World Bioethics Day. And I have to recognize our Dr. Finlay, Ilora Finlay, who was involved with our initial program in Naples when we met, how we put this together with the World Bioethics Day. And every year we have a theme. And this year, the theme is on benefits and harm, Article 4 of the Universal Declaration. So that's going to be our focus today in our discussion. But before this, I want to first, very importantly, welcome. Where is Professor? I want to welcome Professor Amnon. What's happened to Amnon? Professor Amnon Kami, the head and shareholder, has joined us today. And I have a very special welcome to Amnon, who all of you who don't know is probably the most well-known figure in ethics and bioethics in the world. So we're very pleased that Professor Amnon Kami, the head and shareholder, is joining us today. So what we're going to do is we have a program, and how it's going to work is we're going to start this inauguration with a dance performance by the bioethics student wing from one of our units, medical college, medical universities, Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences. So they're going to depict in dance form art, the concept of benefit and harm. And after that, today is the World Bioethics Day is tomorrow, 19th. We are bringing this in. So we're going to also launch or inaugurate. We've had the education department has been working, as you know, with number of students from the International Federation of Medical Students and so forth. But another important aspect has happened. We brought the four medical students association, that is the American Medical Students Association of America, the Medical Students Association of Europe, the Medical Students Association of Asia, and the African Federation of Medical Students. They've come together to form the International Students Association of the UNESCO chair from the Education Department, and they're coming together to be launched on the World Bioethics Day. So we'll have a very short, the president, and she'll introduce from each of the from the different continents their members. And after that, we will be having a presentation on benefit and harm by Professor Danielle Keda, who is also part of my team, part of the education department, but she's from the University of Haifa. And she's going to present this in the context of COVID, since we are all very much involved in this. And she'll also bring in how to teach bioethics, as she's developed some innovative teaching methodologies for that. And we then open up into an international panel discussion. I'm very delighted to have in our panel here well, all the main from the world, colleagues from the UNESCO chair in bioethics. So I will have Professor Rui Nunes, who is with us from Porto. Rui, do you want to put your hand up so people can recognize you?
Just wave, Professor.
Yeah,
yes,
that's Rui Nunes, who is the full professor at Porto. He looks after, he's in the head director of research, and we have a PhD program that I'm involved with around the world working with him. Then we have Wochin. Where's our Rajiv? Put your hand up. Yes, Wochin is a professor from Belgrade, and he is the head of the European division of the UNESCO chair in bioethics. And I want to introduce Pire Effa. Professor Effa, do you want to put your hand up so people can, Professor Effa, can you put your hand up?
Can you just wave, Professor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Professor Effa is the head of the African division of the UNESCO chair in bioethics. And then we have Baroness Ilora Finlay, who is the head of the United Kingdom, but importantly, she has been very actively involved with the education department with me, and I have to acknowledge it was her her role at Naples that actually brought this World Bioethics Day, putting it together and putting the team, the first one that we had. Elora, I remember that, and we acknowledge your contribution to that. Elora, of course, is the from the House of Lords in United Kingdom, and she's gotten a very active role with our Department of Education. So, and then who else is there? We have Madalena. Madalena Patrico is from Portugal. Yes, Professor Madalena. She is from the University of Lisbon, and she's from the medical education and also from the Association of Medical Education of Europe, where we have a collaboration, or MOU, with the Department of Education. So Madalena is going to be one more. So that is there anyone else there from the panel that should be here? And Joe Tompton.
Professor Joe, yes.
Professor Joe Tompton, thank
yes.
you. Joe Tompton is also from our education department, but he's also the head. He's from the University of Florida in United States, part of our program. And then we have Professor Ved Prakash Mishra, who is there with us. He is the chancellor, pro-chancellor of the university, who is part of our program, but he's also the head of the academic programs of the large Indian program of the UNESCO chair in bioethics. So, and then we have my dear friend, Professor Moti Baniaka. Moti Baniaka is from Buenos Aires, from Argentina. Moti, do you want to put your hand up? Yep.
Yes.
And Moti is the head of the Ibero-American division of the UNESCO chair. I have to say that Rui, besides being the director, he also looks after the Portuguese-speaking units of the UNESCO chair. Is that right, Rui? Yeah. And I'm looking for Susanna. I saw Susanna here. Susanna, are you there? I would like to introduce Susanna is the one who you will all get letters from. She is the administration head in at the UNESCO chair in bioethics. Susanna.
Can you wave, please?
Where is Susanna? We're trying to.
I've sent you a request to unmute.
Yeah.
Can you unmute yourself?
Good. I don't know where is. She was there. I did see her. Tama, Dr. Tama, you You saw Susanna, didn't you?
Yes, I am here, you now.
Yeah. Anyhow. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do now is to bring in Princey. Professor Princey Palaki is the head of the South India chair of that unit, and what she's going to tell you about the inaugural dance performance by the medical students. And can you please go ahead and take do your Princey, can you unmute yourself?
I've sent a request to unmute Princey. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
No. She's
Please
no, you're
unmute.
not
Yeah.
unmuted.
Now she is.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
And Derek,
Good
you're
evening,
going to be doing the other thing, isn't it?
Yes.
So greetings from India, everyone. And on this fourth year that we are celebrating the World Bioethics Day on the theme of benefit and harm, Article 3 in the Universal Declaration of Bioethics and Human Rights, we can depict bioethics in many different ways. One of the best expression is in the art form, and one of the most expressive art form is dance. And here we have our students who will be presenting a dance drama. And we have, as it is indigenized, culture specific, we have converted the benefit and harm as a rakshak, who is a protector, and the harm, that is a rakshas, who is destructive. So those are the terms that will come through, but it's 2-3 dance forms that are fused into one. And here I would like to take anticipatory bail and forgiveness, because being the COVID times, the three dancers are in three geographical locations, and it's only good editing that has put it together and send it down to Australia. So I should say thanks to digitalized world. And here we have the dance form that is depicting from our institute. Within 3 days, they have put this and edited together. So over to you. You can see what it means about. And here we have put benefit over harm. It is one of the interpretations. You may take it, here we have taken a person, a patient. You may take it as in different ways that you wish. So interpretation is the key to the principle. So here we see one of the aspects. You can watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Princey. And as I share screen, I think this is a perfect example of international solidarity, which you were talking about, that we have not allowed anything to hold us back. And despite the challenges, we've been able to put this together. So I'm just starting it. If somebody could just confirm that the sound is audible.
It's not audible.
Visible it is.
It's visible, but not audible.
Okay, just a second.
A very good morning to one and all. We, the students of Amrita Institute of Medical Science, try to bring you out into a dance drama depicting the victory of benefits over harm. Using the dance forms, contemporary, Kathak, Mohiniyattam, folk dance, and a mixture of dance forms. Contemporary is a style of expressive dance that combines elements of several dance genres including modern jazz, lyrical, and classical ballet. Kathak, one of 8 major forms of classical dance, attributed to the ancient borders of Karnataka. The movements include intricate footwork and gestures adapted from the normal body language. Mohiniyattam. It is said that the body should move as a wind is blowing the leaves. That is the concept of Mohiniyattam. So, now let me take you through our plot. The protagonist of our theme, The Benefit of Harm Over Evil, is a girl who is happy with her friends and the surrounding, but gradually she finds out she was suffering from a disease. Now, the disease, which we take in our dance plot as the Rakshasa, the evil, is trying to make her inconsolable, dejected, and conquer her mind. Though she has almost fell at the feet of defeat. Due to the act of having medicines, she is ready to fight back with the good, the Rakshaka. The good, that is depicting the action of medicines in our plot, tries to pick up herself to make her strong and ready to fight against the evil, the Rakshasa. So, though she starts the fight, she is defeated due to the ill effects of the disease. Yet, she tries to win back by fighting the devil, the Rakshasa, by the Rakshaka on her side. And then, finally, the evil left her forever, as one can't conquer the mind when the mind is in the power of us. So, her rejoice is back as she has regained the health she lost by the weapon willpower, which depicts as Rakshaka in our plot. So here, dear friends, we present to you the drama, the dance drama depicting victory of benefit over harm.
Back to you, Dr. Mary.
All right.
Dr.
That
Russell.
was very nice. Thank you, Princey, and congratulations to all the medical students who took part in that. This brings us to another short but important aspect of today's program. I said earlier, we have brought over the last few months of planning, we brought together the four regions. That is the American Medical Schools Medical Students Association, the European Medical Students Association and the Federation of African Medical Students Association and the Asian Medical Students Association, they've all come together with a lot of planning and statutes and so forth, and formed the International Medical Students Association of the UNESCO with the Education Department, taking an active role in bringing in ethics into all these regions. So I'm going to invite the founding president, Dr. Ronak Verma. She is the president, but she will introduce the European, the American, the African, and the Asian components or vice presidents together in a few minutes. So, Ronak, can you, over to you for a few minutes. So this is, of course, the World Bioethics Day, and I think we thought this is appropriate that we have this. Would you like to start? Do you want to introduce your colleagues, or do you want to present?
Sure, sir. I'll just give a brief introduction, and then we have Francis with us, who will be presenting on our behalf. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity, and it is a great privilege to be here to launch this program, the Students Association. I am Ronak Verma, and may I now give it over to Francis, who will be presenting the presentation about the association. Over to you, Francis.
Just a minute, Francis. I'll unmute you.
Yeah, Dr. Derek will unmute you. One moment, please.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Francis.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Frances Chukwu, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the International Students Association, the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics. Next please. By way of introduction, we are a global network of students and young people committed towards one common goal of increasing interest and respect values involved in healthcare delivery, and also raising awareness for competing interests. And we're working under the aegis of the Department of Education of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics. And this program is committed to nurturing young people in the realms of bioethics and human rights. And the aim is to ensure youth advocacy as well as meaningful participation in the field of bioethics and human rights. Next, please. Our vision, we're committed to disseminating, improving and monitoring education in ethics in schools via meaningful youth involvement. And we have a couple of ways that we're going about that. Next slide, please. The first is by reflecting from a student's perspective on the need for integration of ethics in daily practice, we increase interest and respect values involved in healthcare delivery, and also raising awareness for competing interests. Next slide, please. And secondly, also introducing students to different non-medical facets of various non-medical facets of medicine, sociology, economics, and public administration. Now, these are not usually routinely included in the medical curriculum, but it's also an important part of medical education. Next slide, please. The third is to report student feedback in developing novel, modern, and sophisticated educational tools and materials that facilitate attractive teaching. Next slide, please. Now, what are our specific goals and objectives? What do we intend to achieve specifically? The first is to promote youth bioethics education via the international certificate course and capacity building toolkits and various workshops for bioethics education, and as well as increasing student participation at World Bioethics conferences. Next slide, please. We also to increase student participation at the Global Bioethics Inquiry, which is the scholarly publication of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, as well as provide outreach and readership among students for Bioethical Voices, which is the newsletter of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics. Next slide, please. Now, these meet the first and founding executive body. We have Runak Verma from India, myself from Nigeria, we have Emma Nalianya from Kenya, we have Jason Fang from the United States, we have Anna Tapani from Greece, we have Alara from Turkey, we have Laura from Kenya, and we have Prachish from India, and we're also expanding. Thank you very much.
You want to stop the, yeah, thank you. And congratulations and welcome Ronak and team
Thank you very much, sir.
To the International Medical Students Association, which comprises all the continent, all the regions of the world joining together with our education department. So I'm delighted to welcome, I'm delighted to present, and I'm sure Professor Kami will be a great mentor and will be very happy with our program going into the young minds, and they are the future. And I think that's a great event that happened today at the World Bioethics Day. So now I'm going to progress on to the next part of this program, and that is a presentation by Professor Danielle Keda from the university, from the Haifa University, who's going to make a presentation on benefit and harm in the context of COVID. I think she wants to also show some of the methodology they're using in teaching bioethics, particularly with benefit and harm. Over to you, Daniela. You have to unmute. Derek, can you unmute Daniela?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so nice to meet you all. I'm very happy to be here, and I hope that the presentation will go, you know, as usual in meeting face by face. And I will start. I have two topics, as Professor Russell mentioned. One, benefit and harm, you know, in the COVID era, and this is one topic. And the next topic is how to teach benefit and harm, so it can be an imminent issue to the students of medical schools. So I will begin with the first topic. And the COVID-19 forces us to deal with ethical and bioethical dilemmas in the interaction between the individual and society, and between one and one's neighbor in all areas of life. And we can really feel it in Israel very much and all over the world. All over, so in education, in medicine, in law, in economics, in sport, in culture, in parenting, family, society, and more. The dilemmas relate to challenging and critical issues that affect the design of society and the individual. The goodwill of the individual versus goodwill of society. Relativism and objectivism versus social order and uniformity. Autonomy versus considerations of benefit and harm. Freedom of health versus health regime. And the scope is very wide. As time goes by, the virus floats above the fabric of our life, more and more ethical dilemmas are added, some of which have existed since the dawn of humanity, but take on the different of the different garnet and depth, and some are new and or seemingly new. Benefit and harm is a concept that is tried to taught and assimilated in medical studies as an integral part of the physician's conduct. But if we look at the concept at a glance, and especially in the age of the COVID-19, we see how dynamic, changing, sometimes unclear, puzzling, uncertainty, ambiguous this concept is. What is clear is that what characterizes us today is the dynamic in treating patients from sociological, psychological, social, and certainly medical aspects. Popular dilemmas related to benefit and harm include, forced feeding, clinical trials in humans, medical treatments that causes benefit in one hand and harm in the other hand, prolonging life in the face of euthanasia, harvesting and transplanting organs, and the scope is even wider. At the bioethical base, in terms of benefit and harm, there are three main concepts, or if you will say, the three P's: to prevent, to protect, and to promote. Those are three P's. So sometimes the dilemmas are in these components and between them, and the question asked is what benefit and what harm are in these components. At a time when the world is ruled by the coronavirus, questions of benefit and harm arise even more powerfully, and new and renewed bioethical dilemmas are observed. I will relate to the prevent, promote, and protect by some examples. Enormous economic, structural, and human resources are devoted to dealing with the coronavirus and its consequences. These are flow to resources, raises many bioethical questions, included a basic one that may be pushed to the edge of consciousness in the heat of events, and is how to divide resources between corona patients and other normal patients in need of treatment. In Israel, we really confronted very much what kind of sources, how we can divide those sources between the normal, patient and the corona patient. We know that in many medical institutions, surgeries have been postponed, hospitalizations have been suspended, and treatments of other medical issues have been postponed. At the forefront of treatment are the corona patients. This is what is really important, and the fight against the virus. The benefit to the fight against the corona and the world is clear, but on the other hand, harm and be done to other patients. Other patients are really neglected from the beginning, from the first moment. And sometimes we have patients that are afraid to come to the hospital because they are, first of all, afraid not to be treated. Secondly, a lot of people are really, they got, the coronavirus because they were at the hospital. Or routine is clearly felt in hospitals and medical institutions. Physicians and medical staff face daily and hour-to-hour difficult decisions on benefit and harm considerations. It is not disputed that, for example, damage and harm have been caused in the treatment of chronic and acute diseases due to the tip of the spear and the medical priority for dealing with the corona. So other people were neglected. There is also a dramatic change from the patient's perspectives. First of all, patients avoid going to hospitals and medical institutions for fear that they will be harmed by the virus. This avoidance of treatment causes an increase in the indirect mortality rate. So we clearly see that there is also a dramatic change from the patient's perspective. Patients avoid going to hospitals and medical institutes for fear that they will be harmed by the virus and be harmed not just by the virus, but also by the staff. I have a friend, her mother, she just had a 100th birthday, okay, on August, she was 100 years old, and she suddenly felt very bad, and they took the mother of my friend to the hospital. When she came home, he said she never took any pills. She was very healthy, but she came home back with the coronavirus. Now, we are really afraid what will happen because she felt no so good, but we are really afraid what will happen. And she went to the hospital to get some small treatment and go back to her home with the coronavirus. This is a very huge harm to a very minor treatment and the benefit. They will be, so this avoidance of treatment causes an increase in the indirect mortality rate. Another major and important issue is a third age population. The social isolation imposed on this group is indeed necessary in terms of guarding against infection. We have a lot of older people who really feel ill, not because of coronavirus, but because of the isolation. The harm of the isolation sometimes is much more huge than the harm of being ill. So I think that every country really confront this problem. At the same time, we are all witness and aware of the mental, psychological, social, and other medical damages caused to this population around the world. I see it really tragic because when we hear the voice and we hear, an older woman, she said, please let me just see. It is not enough for me, the Zoom, or, when I really need to see, to touch, to hear. I'm alone for 30, 40, 50 days. Nobody comes to see me. Nobody hugs me. Nobody touches me. And we know this is a very huge problem. And the break of their heart. And one older woman told me, I will die not from the coronavirus, I will die from loneliness, okay, from my break heart. One of many examples of how much uncertainty and relatively again momentum because of the corona is related to the therapist-patient interaction in aspects of physical closeness. Every therapist understands that closeness and direct contact with a patient are constants of the medical treatment and that their use unequivocally, the closeness of the doctor is so important, is a part of the treatment because, the communication, the eye contact, the touch really can give the patient the motivation to heal, the belief in the doctor. So they cause the patient and motivates him or her recover. There is no doubt that the lack of closeness and precautions reduce the damage that can be caused by the infection with the virus. But there is also no doubt that the lack of closeness causes harm to the patient, sometimes significant and severe. So here is what I told you is the example of my friend, of the mother of my friend, which she feels so bad, and now she is now isolated for 2 weeks for her family, from treatment, but from her daughter, and she cried almost every day, and she knows that she cannot see her daughter, but she is 100 years old, and what she needs is a small glimpse of her daughter, a small hug. So what is harm and what is benefit and what is damage, you can really imagine. So when we defined benefit and harm, we defined something very close, but now in the COVID area, it is widened, and the ethical and bioethical dilemmas really have another smell, another touch, another glimpse, and we have really to consider it and to take it into another place. So this was one topic. If you want to ask something, because I'm going to the other topic, or the discussion will be later, okay?
Yeah, Daniela, we'll take it at the end. You can continue.
Okay, so now the other topic is how to teach benefit and harm at the school. And I have chosen to give you an example of one lesson that I teach these issues. So let's imagine that we are in a class, in a normal class, and we met the students, and I will give you some stages of how to teach. So the first one is the target is to really arouse a question, a dilemma at the students. And first of all, I will speak about 5 minutes I will give some introduction about what does it mean, benefit and harm. And I have some, some say, which Socrates said, life without self-checking are appropriate for a man. So what I say, just check about how you really live. The second stage, I will really start with a story, a story. And I start with a story about my family, about raising children, a personal story, because most of us, all of us, are parents, and sometimes, and as a parent, we want to benefit and to give benefit to our children. But sometimes we are doing, vice versa, we are doing harm. For example, when we want to protect our children too much, and we don't give them to confront some, negative feelings. I remember, my small daughter, she was 13 years old, and she asked me, she told me, Mother, I couldn't do my homework. Can you done it for me? Not help me. Can you done it for me and just write a note? So I wanted very much to do it for her. But I really knew what harm it can be, it can cause, because I want to protect her, I want to benefit. But the harm of educating and giving some, ethical behavior is much more than just doing her homework. So why I choose to start with this example? Because it's really close to everyone and each of us. And our brain will really hear us if really we raise some interest and relevancy. And it is relevant to each and every one. And if we just stop for a minute and think about ourselves as parents, as educators, we can really remember or some things that we have done when our children were small or maybe bigger, and how we wanted and we have the attention to do some which we can really define as benefit, but it really was no so much benefit in it. I don't want to say harm. So the next stage is to really speak about an example, and then to ask the students if they have some examples. And we can really analyze some dilemmas which is close to each and every one of us. The fourth stage can be or to really give some minutes of film. I gave an Anatomy of Grey, of these films, and there are a lot of benefit and harm situations. Or I can really divide them to two people in two couples, and one can tell how, can give an example about an event which he felt or she felt that harm has caused to her or to him. Something, a story that he can say, I felt that something bad happened to me, even though that someone wanted to give me, to make me feel good, but some harm was caused to me. And the other part of the couple will say, oh, no, just a minute, or he can also tell a story that his intention or her intention was to benefit somebody, and it doesn't go like this. And the end of the story, that really the other part was harmed. Another example can be that somebody really say or can tell about the benefit that he felt that he get in any event, or a benefit that she or he gave to another person. So after this, we will give this example in the classroom, and then we will ask a question. What are the tools that enable us to analyze if we did something which benefit or harm? So the tools are three. First of all, what we think about, to combine the rational thinking. The second, what we feel about it. And the third, how we behave. And then another question will be, how do you think to the classroom we can really decrease the harm if it's so? What can we do to decrease some actions that we made and to decrease the harm, and to really analyze the intensify, and to intensify, not to analyze, to intensify their benefit, how we can do it. So when we analyze the stories from the point of view of thinking, feeling, behaving, we can really make the student to be conscious, not just by doing, but really to be conscious before doing something, before really making an action, before really making a move toward the behavior. So why I teach like this? Because I want to really be, I tried to be, practical, first of all. Secondly, to arise an interest, a special interest, and not just special interest, but when a student can really touch it from a point of view of interpersonal, of personal interest, it is different when we just speak about it. And of course, the rise of dilemma, which are personal, really touches each and every one of us. So if I will sum up, I think that every lesson has to take in account our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior, and every lesson can take in account that each and every student has its own experience of benefit and harm, and it is very important to discuss it. Sometimes I think to myself that I don't need really to prepare the lesson because the examples of each and every student are so wide. So it's not just the issue is how to teach it. And I hope that I really succeeded. I have succeeded to give you some perspective of the benefit and harm in the Corona age and how to teach it in medical schools. So thank you very much for being for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. So, you very nicely and very nicely said and very nicely put. And we at this point, may I request all our panelists to please switch on your videos. So Baroness Finlay, Professor Rui Nuance, Professor Ifa, Professor Madalena, Professor Joe Thornton, Professor Moti Banyaka, Professor Ved Prakash, and Professor Shailin is not there, I suppose. Yeah. So this.
Professor Shailin has joined us from Canada.
She has joined.
Even, Professor Kami is back.
Welcome, Shailin, from, I know you're early morning in Vancouver. You joined us.
Good morning.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for all of this. Professor Kame, if you're still, you can switch on your video if you'd like. And if your audio is working, you can also share a few words. So what we'd like to do now is this year's theme for the World Bioethics Day is benefit and harm. And I think it's such an apt theme considering we never anticipated the coronavirus pandemic. And what has been, what I'm going to do right now is just discuss a few aspects. We cannot cover all the aspects. So just a few aspects which people have been talking about and what is happening currently in the world. So I will take the issue of lockdown first, because now we are 6 months, 7 months past the lockdown, and we have had the time to think about it. And the reason for the lockdown was with the hope that this virus, we can contain the spread of the virus, and hoping that we could reduce the mortality. So right now, in hindsight, when you look at it, because different countries are in different stages of lockdown, unlocking and locking. So countries which have unlocked now are now locking, and some are, still in lockdown, okay, and some had never locked. All right. So may I ask? I will address it to each one of you, and I'll call your name so that we don't have any confusion who's to go first and who's the next. I will start with Baroness Ilora Finlay. Baroness, UK had a very different. Can you please unmute? Yeah. UK had a different system because they were one among the last countries to have a lockdown or a semi-lockdown. Now, what do you think? Was it of any benefit to the country, or has it caused more harm? Or or was the decision taken correct?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Before I answer, can I just say that I thought the students' program and the students' dance was wonderful, and it just shows the power of art to express the things that we feel as well as the things that we think. And it was really brilliant. So thank you to all the students who've done that and worked so hard to put it together. In terms of lockdown, yes, I think we went into lockdown, but I think we went too late. If you're going into lockdown, you have to go in right at the beginning of that curve. The problem is that if you don't, the numbers overwhelming the healthcare system are terrible. And we saw all those images from Italy at the beginning when the hospitals were completely heaving. We had images from China as well, right at the very beginning, with people in the corridors, dying in corridors, not enough people to look after them. Absolutely terrible. So you have to control the numbers coming in. The problem is that as you flatten the curve, if you like, rather than have a peak, then you will have it go on for longer. And now what we found is as we've released more and more and students have gone back to university and people have moved around, people have got fatigued of restrictions, and they have unfortunately been mixing more than was required. And so we're heading into the second wave of it. And now we've got local lockdowns coming. But of course, there are arguments all the time between the business interests and the individuals as to who should lock down and who shouldn't, and the libertarian view, which is it's my choice, I do what I want, versus the duty to society. And the problem is that we know as well now that there are some people who are super spreaders, have a high viral load, but asymptomatic, so they spread it widely, and yet other people become desperately ill and die. So I think one of the really big things coming out of this is the fact that autonomy, as interpreted in recent years as being my choice, this is what I want, and so on, really has to go back to the old original concept of relational autonomy and our duty towards each other. And that involves a duty to not cause harm to other people.
Yes, yes. So do you think, were there any benefits at all?
Oh, I think the benefits certainly were in decreasing the numbers who were admitted. It allowed people to provide proper care. It allowed the proper research studies to happen, which involved the early antivirals and of course dexamethasone, moving from invasive ventilation to CPAP for the very ill. And it allowed people to understand the profound immune response, which results in some people collapsing and dying. Okay. So I think, you have to slow enough to allow people to think. And the other benefit was that we dispensed with a lot of bureaucracy all of a sudden. And I hope that bureaucracy never comes back, because it was just mindless paperwork without any great benefit. And so by speeding up research processes, by people moving around, by being imaginative in how they provided care, I think we have had a benefit of an enormous amount of creativity in healthcare provision. The other thing is it's probably brought forward in time the collapse of some things like the small shops that probably was going to happen at some point in the future. But of course, that's devastating. And now we're faced with high unemployment.
Do you think it protected the children, Baroness Finlay?
Did it protect children? Well, the evidence is that children don't get COVID as seriously. It may well be tied up with the presence of ACE2 inhibitors in the nasopharynx and that children don't have many, whereas older people have a lot, particularly with people with hypertension. So the virus just latches onto that, gets into the cells and multiplies. And we've had a lot of children who presented very early on with gastroenteritis, so-called. That probably was COVID, but they were never tested and we don't know. But I think the other thing that's been a very strong lesson is that the children must remain in school. The psychological harm of not educating them, not having them in their groups is greater. And we know that when they've been locked at home, the instance of child abuse has gone up enormously and the instance of domestic abuse. So those societal consequences have to be considered as well.
Yes, thank you, Baroness Findlay. Professor Ved Prakash, are you there? Professor? Yeah. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Professor Ved Prakash, India is a country of 1.3 billion. Do you think the lockdown has helped us and or has it really harmed us?
See, basically, if you really look at it in terms of the huge population at our disposal, in terms of the density of habitation that we have, it was imperative that we needed to take certain prompt measures, independent of what the likely consequences ought to be. That's the core line consideration. Having said so, Dr. Mary, the second important aspect which is required to be highlighted is practically every expert knew that lockdown is not a real measure which will be in a position to do a very huge concrete good. But it was primarily for the purpose of ensuring that the mobility and the spread that it can generate, that has to be put under check. And that absolute check is possible only by lockdown. And mind well, even in regard to pandemics and the lockdown, there is a modality which has been prescribed by the WHO itself, in what phases it ought to be, then what breaks are required to be given, and then how it is required to be put across, and how exactly the unlocking mechanisms are required to be put in. The important aspect is that lockdown is also a period which is at one end marginally preventive, but more than that, that time is required to be created, availed for the purpose of building the infrastructural facilities in terms of augmentation, which is inevitable and which will be required to be undertaken when the real progression and the peak arises. So it is in that context when you visualize making preparations for tackling the future malady and the consequences which are inevitable. Lockdown has never been a cure at any point of time for any epidemic on any occasion, but it has always been availed as a modality for the purpose of utilizing the time for preparation. And mind well, it will always have resultant consequences. It will have several problems associated with it. But then when you are wanting to weigh, again, an ethical dilemma, wanting to weigh the situation on two counts, whether it is going to be beneficial or it is going to be harmful, then in that situation, the balancing is that this is a risk which is required to be undertaken in the name of a probable larger good, which definitely has been there. And even in the present situation, it cannot be denied that the lockdown did not help Indian context, especially from the point of view of updating the infrastructural facilities, augmenting the infrastructural facilities, and working out pre-preparations, which today they are being availed with a reasonable and substantial degree of usage. As I already said, that there are economic consequences, there are psychological consequences, there are social consequences, there are personal consequences, including compromising and marginalization on several counts of liberty and free movement and whatnot. But ultimately, they have to be weighed. And in terms of weighing, I have a definite reason to believe that in the Indian context, lockdown definitely has helped in facilitating our entire mechanism and gearing it up for the purposes of tackling, which is evident from the fact that the recovery rate which we have been able to invoke, the availability of the infrastructural facilities, again, the huge population and the the rapidity of the infection that we suffered, reasonably we have been able to tackle it well, primarily because of the interim period having been availed for a reasonable degree of preparation, and therefore independent of the consequential cost and consequences, definitely lockdown has resulted in curtailing and the augmentation of the recovery rate from the said malady in a huge way.
Yeah, Professor Ved Prakash, I think we have protected our children still. They still do not go to school. So we do not know what will happen once they start going to school. So do you think that we should anticipate problems now?
See, again, I'm telling you, as I said, it is true that if you really take into consideration the vulnerability of age group, one of the important aspects of lockdown is that we are also risking and we are also availing that modality, because the herd immunity or the community immunity as we contemplate, that is definitely going to be blocked by virtue of the lockdown. But then high risk group, which is required to be protected, that is equally of importance, and I think that has been worked out. Opening of the schools, mind well, again I'm telling you, it's a group which otherwise is not that risky and vulnerable, but the nature of the school going children, the age and the tender age in which they are, and the possibilities of the requirements of the care and caution, which perhaps other than the children group, it is handy and easy for them, may not be that facilitatory when it comes to that young vulnerable group. And it is in that count, one has to be very, very careful and vigilant in regard to, especially like public places have to be closed. But even if the public places are open, opening of schools in the present context would definitely be with a greater degree of risk because of the nature of the group, which is vulnerable and susceptible, especially from the point of view of taking that required degree of care and caution, which may not be expected out of them. And it is in that context that decision is very delicately poised, and maybe again I am saying, independent of the consequences, it has to be a careful and absolutely a cautious decision.
Yeah, because India has been deferring the opening of schools for a long time because they're very cautious about children. Thank you, Professor Ved Prakash. May I ask Professor Moti Banyakar? Professor, you're in to the audience. Professor Moti Banyakar is from Argentina. Can you please unmute yourself?
Moti, can you unmute? Yeah. No. Yes. Good.
Professor Moti, your experience in Argentina, the effects of lockdown, and which stage of lockdown are you all in, or have you all unlocked yourself?
Yeah. Thank you very much, first of all. I want to say that in this situation, there are three different stages. The first, an acute stage. The second, that we enter now, I think, in the world. And the third, that we don't know. In the first step, I think that all the people were shocked. And all the people, they behave in the way that they own the politics, behave in the way that behave always here in Argentina. It's what they say, the iron hand. That means that if they will decide, the population will agree what they are deciding. The truth was that they decide to close all the shops and all the works that they have in Argentina for more or less 1 or 2 months. And you have to know that in Argentina, people don't like to work very much. And this means also that the results of those things were that people continue doing what they want. They close the economy, and I think that was a catastrophe. And we see now that 15% of the business in Argentina were broken. The people, the children, till now, they didn't go to school. And the way to behave with the children was very, very bad. This is the first step. The second step, now they are trying to recover from the business and also from school doing. But what I want to say, that in the first step, and in the second step, the place of human relations, the place of psychic dealing with psychic problems here.
Psychological problems, yes.
Yes, psychological problem was really neglected. That means indeed that in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, are the biggest number of psychoanalysts and psychologists in the world in Buenos Aires. Yeah? But what happened is the relationship between the politics and professional in this way. I think that the way that they are dealing with this problem here in Argentina, I speak about the relationships. I speak about what happened with people trying to deal with this problem with more conscious of the place of the human beings, not only in the acute place, also a stage, but also in the not the second stage, the third stage. That's mean what will happen there. The situation of infection here don't allow low because you closed all the shops and locked down all the business here, and that means that what we have to do generally in those situations is to think about the relationship of all the stages. That means the relationship between children, the relationship between business, and the relationship between health. In the health treatment, I can say that with very few or very poor conditions, they try to do the best in the hospitals. But the politics of not trying to develop economy in the way that you have to do, the number of people that they have myocardial disease related to the uncertainty growth more than 20%.
Okay.
The number of children that they are commit suicide, they grow incredible.
Okay.
And also those people that they don't have a future to continue working, the suicide number also increased very much. That means we have to think in a more broad spectrum, and I think that this is our aim, and this is what we have to do from our field in bioethics.
As a health professional.
Yes, and also in the bioethics conception also.
Yes, thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Moti. I think globally we are there's a show of poor leadership, and probably that is the reason why we are seeing a lot. The results of this pandemic are not very good, but then certain countries have done extremely well too, so that we have to acknowledge that. I'll go to Professor Rui. Professor Rui, to the audience, Professor Rui is from Portugal. Professor Rui, Portugal started Porto, yes. Portugal was doing very well, right? Because it was one of the few European countries that had a very low rate of COVID-19. How is the situation now, and what were the effects of the lockdown? Was it helpful, or was it, or did it come with a lot of bad consequences?
Yes, first of all, let me thank you very much the invitation. I would like to congratulate the organization, namely Professor Russell de Souza, Mary Matthew, and Derek, and other members of the team. And also a special recognition to Professor Amnon Karmi, that I believe that is among us, and saying that it is a great honor to be here and to help this UNESCO chair in bioethics fulfilling its job at the worldwide level. I'd also say that the theme of this webinar is benefit and harm. And at least from a continental European tradition, doing the benefit for the patients and avoiding harm, of course, are the traditional principles of medical ethics. Indeed, in Portugal and many other countries, young physicians still make the Hippocratic Oath, meaning that they commit themselves to doing good for their patients and avoiding, of course, harm. So this is as traditional as medicine can be. But these ethical principles of medicine and other healthcare professions in last decades must be also integrated with other visions of ethics, namely the exercise of personal autonomy, the respect for privacy, justice and equity. And so I feel that we should have some lessons to learn from this pandemic, that there is no one single principle in bioethics, but they must all be weighed in specific moments so that individual rights and also the common good are always fulfilled. Secondly, I would say that what does it mean doing good in this pandemic of COVID-19? We are not sure yet what are the results of lockdown. In Portugal, the results were very interesting in the first phase. We are now in the second wave as all other European countries. We are not in the lockdown stage as we were in the first phase, because people are much more aware now that there are some social things they must do, simple things as using a mask everywhere or avoiding large groups of people. Of course, it is not universal, but most people have learned this lesson. And so I don't feel that we will have a second lockdown as strong as the first, not because the numbers are lower, but because people are more aware and more responsible than in the past. But nevertheless, I think that there is that fundamental question I asked before that still doesn't have an answer. What does it mean to doing good when we are not sure what are the results of many pharmaceuticals, such as remdesivir? We learned a few days ago that only dexamethasone was effective in treating and saving lives in COVID-19. Yes. And so to finish, just to say that we need to think of further global arrangements in health and in science, so that in a future pandemic or in another global crisis, science can give specific and rapid answers to these questions, because otherwise political actors in different countries will have different solutions that perhaps we don't agree. But I think that in most cases is because of the lack of evidence-based science and medicine to say clearly that this is the pathway and the other is not so adequate. So I think for the time being in Portugal, things are controlled. I'm not sure what the future will be in the next weeks or months, but nevertheless, the lockdown was necessary, because when there is a fundamental interest, public interest, I think that with very cautious, fundamental rights can be compressed only to the extent that the public good is at stake.
Yes, thank you, Professor Rui. I will go to Professor Joe Thornton. Professor Joe Thornton is from USA. Now, USA had a Florida, USA, yes. And I think USA had a very interesting quarantine or lockdown, but not sure, because some states were in lockdown, some were not. So I don't think it was uniform throughout United States. Professor Joe, what were the benefits and harms that happened because the country didn't some states locked down, some didn't? and some, didn't even bother about the consequences.
Right. Well, thank you for this presentation. One of the main lessons we learned from bringing arts into medicine, dance into the discussion, it helps free us from a binary failure. So the discussion, whether we lock down or not lock down, just magnified the polarity that already exists in our country and as further to harm to our society. Hopefully the threat will get us through this, through some increase in problem solving, but nobody, nowhere in the United States did we completely lock down successfully. There was some targeted lockdown in highly afflicted locations, which when you see the hospitals getting overwhelmed, that's what you're trying to prevent. One of the earlier speakers mentioned that the main purpose of the lockdown was to preserve the functioning of the healthcare system. But we also needed time to advance our ability to analyze the problem, to use strategic interventions, increase the options. For example, the use of telehealth has been one of the benefits that come from this, but we've had such harm from the isolation, the economy. We haven't been able to successfully address that. And so the overall, the harm has been from further division, further impairment in our ability to think and problem solve that we're still struggling to get through. Hopefully, we persist. We have to persist due to the nature of the dilemma we're in, and the elections may offer hope or may just exacerbate our current situation. We don't know.
But the USA they took autonomy to the limit.
We're trying. We're trying. There's some places it became a political issue, so
yes.
There was no factual. You could not have a factual discussion. Everything became weighted in how it was viewed politically, despite the consequences. And then they dismiss it and say, well, it's everybody's free choice.
Yes.
So you either stay home in a
America
bubble.
took out the libertarian kind of view, exercising autonomy to the maximum. So,
right, and it's not worked out so well.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Professor Joe. May I go to Professor? Would you like to say something else? Were you going to say something else, Professor Joe? No. Okay. Professor Ifa? Professor Ifa is from Cameroon.
Can you unmute?
You can unmute yourself, Professor.
Yeah. No.
Can you? I have unmuted you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm there.
Yeah. Professor, if we wanted to hear, I know Cameroon does not, represent the entire Africa, but Africa started late when it came to lockdown. And now, has it benefited or has it caused more harm to what is happening, currently?
Well, the situation in Africa, as you know, the main problem is the social and economic situation. Yeah. And when you have lockdown, for some people, it's not affordable. Even 2 days, and usually lockdown is for months. And the population cannot afford it, economy cannot afford. And now the African community have to find ways to how to go out of this situation.
Okay.
But when the use of lockdown helped a lot where it was practiced in terms of spreading the virus. what helped a lot in Africa is that the virus, the epidemic was mainly in towns, not in rural areas. And the majority of the population is still living in rural areas.
Yes.
And with the lockdown, there was no way, to go to the rural areas as people needed to go. And it helped a lot in this this perspective.
Thank you, Professor Ifa. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can hear us, right? Professor
Yes, it's
Ifa?
okay.
Yeah,
It's okay.
yeah.
First,
Okay,
yeah.
yes, you can. Thank you. May I go to Professor Wochin? Professor Wochin? You can unmute yourself, Professor.
I'm in the process of unmuting myself, which has succeeded.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Wochin is
If
from
I'm right.
Belgrade. Yes. Professor, tell us, are you in any sort of lockdown there, or are you free? Are you all able to?
We are
Unlike
not
all of us.
very far from being free, but we are not in a lockdown at this point. The number of infections is rising, but it's not as dramatic according to official data as it is in the surrounding countries and in Western and Southern Europe in general. So it's at this point a bit better here, according again to the official data. We had certain researchers from a couple of NGOs here in Serbia who brought these official data into question. And that is why I'm saying according to official data, but it might, or it seems to have been the case that the real data have been lowered.
Okay, so the data has been lowered.
Seemingly.
Seemingly.
It's a huge accusation, of course, if you claim that. But two very, very respected institutes have come to that conclusion and stated it openly. It is not a dramatic change. So if you have, according to official data here, per day around at this point, which is a point of rising numbers of infected people. If the official data put it at 200, it might be, in the worst case, be 400 to 500. But still, it's not a dramatic number. So even if the official data are falsified, to put it bluntly, even in that case, at this point, it's not a dramatic situation. And we do have here, as in other countries, for instance, like in the US, whole organizations of people who are, we call them here not only anti-vaxxers, but also anti-maskers. They think that their freedom is not to wear a mask, even. Okay, we we saw those cases everywhere, but or not, or in many countries, but in general, people, although the infection at this point here is not that bad, people are generally keeping the rules concerning this distance and mask wearing. So I think that partially explains a relatively low number, but it's still, of course, a very, very precarious situation.
Okay, right. Okay. Thank you, Professor Wochin.
You're welcome. And we'll say, at the end, I was in the beginning busy unmuting myself, but I would like to express my thanks to Professor Russell de Souza for organizing this this event. My respect to Professor Karmi, and of course, my greetings to all of you participants in this event.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor
you.
Wochin.
Thank you, Wochin, for coming.
May I go to Professor Shailen? Professor, you're in Canada now, as of now? Yes. Can you unmute yourself? I've sent you a request.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's very impressive work that Professor de Souza, you, and all the team put forward. I appreciate it. And I thank Professor Karmi for the opportunity to be part of the team, part of the chair. Good to see you.
For once, we can't hear Professor Karmi, and it's really sad.
Well, Professor Karmi should unmute. I think he's
No,
muted.
he's having problems with his audio.
Okay. Good to see you, Professor Karmi.
Okay.
We are speaking about benefit and harm. It is very central to bioethics, of course, and to the situation that we have. We should address this, as Professor Nunes said, as Professor Benyakar said, as Professor Finlay said, and as all the talker before me said, it is very, very important that we take care of it. As physician, the first thing we did, as have been mentioned, is first do no harm, primum non nocere. The question in Latin, right? So now the question is, do we do the right things with the lockdown? Do we do the right things with our treatment of this population? It is important, therefore, to analyze the situation by trying to ask myself, why do we need lockdown, if at all? And then what could be done in order to prevent the lockdown? So as have been mentioned, we can have lockdown, we must have lockdown to stop the spread, to let the medical system rearranged, to understand the disease, and to educate the public on measures like masks, distance, hand washing. Now, we need to think that lockdown is not the right response automatically. It shouldn't be at all be implied automatically. If we had to do it because the epidemic caught us by surprise. But my feeling is that we need to limit the lockdowns to selected populations, only selected populations, to protect them for a very short time. Of course, as we all know, if we lock down people who are a little bit more old, it's not good for them. Yes. The opposite is right. If we lock down the population in general, we increase the chance of becoming infected because they are in closed places. They don't take care of themselves. They don't do sport. They don't eat right. And as have been already mentioned, the problem of violence is increasing. So my feeling is that the right approach in order to lower the harm, considering the benefits, is to avoid lockdown as much as we can, to have selective lockdown if we need to have a lockdown because of we want to stop the disease, to help to begin a little bit easier. But generally, we have to avoid lockdown as much as we can and help the medical system to be ready for the probable load of patients. So may I say that in parallel to avoiding lockdown, we need to finance the medical system. The right thing is to do good medicine. So in general, before the epidemic, if a medical system doesn't have the right funding, the right positions, the right number of doctors and nurses and meds, etc., we don't give good medicine. But now with the epidemic, the medical system may become overwhelmed. So, and that's why we do the lockdown, to let the medical system build itself, deal with the situation. The limiting factor, the bottleneck, sometimes is the medical system. So what we need to do in two more sentences is that we need to avoid lockdown as much as we can. We have to educate the people, to help the people do the right things, to encourage them to go to the park, to the beaches, and to be out of closed places. And we have to finance the medical system. Now, many governments now try to revive the economy after the huge damage that happened to the economy in many countries in the world. Why not reviving the economy through financing the medical system? I'll speak about Israel. Instead of giving to every citizen about $200, I would say the right thing is to give the medical system great funding, like building two new hospitals that are needed anyhow, and giving twice as many positions and doctors and nurses in bed, and then the medical system wouldn't be a bottleneck, and we would not need to have lockdown.
Yes.
So these are the considerations, I think, of benefit and harm in the state level.
Yeah, but Professor Shailen, that will depend on whether it is a developing country or a developed country or an underdeveloped country. Because it is, I mean, countries which already are in the low socioeconomic, strata would not be able to survive this pandemic. And the chances of them recovering the economy it's going to take a very long time. So, but countries which have the provision, who can, I think should go about the way you've suggested. Thank you, Professor Shailen.
Thank you.
Professor Madalena, we always wait for the pretty lady at the end.
Oh, Professor Mary Mathieu, so nice words.
Yes.
So what I wanted to say, and has been said by all speakers, is that it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you, to be part of this panel. And I just to say congratulations for this great day, where the World Bioethics Day. Having said this, and coming back to your question, I think when we talk about lockdowns, the question is also for how long? Because an argument in favor of lockdowns is that postponing the epidemic wave, we can gain time for vaccines and to reduce strain on the health system. But however, vaccines take so long that we cannot go on with the lockdowns. And I fully agree with what Professor Shailen just said. This is not, in principle, is not response. And although I'm aware that there is not a single truth, and as you said, Professor Mary Mathieu, there is developed countries, underdeveloped, and so on, that oblige governments and health system authorities to take different measures. I would like to call your attention to an article published by Professor Ioannidis from the Department of Medicine and Epidemiology and Population Health at Stanford University, where he is calling for the problems we are facing, that it's not the COVID, but outside the COVID, the fake news and withdrawn papers, the exaggerated pandemic estimates, the case fertility rates, all the measures that have been taken without evidence-based medicine, the extreme measures, and so on. It goes one by one. And the harm from the non-evidence-based methods and the misallocation of resources. And the problem is, as we all know now, that before the 60s, the COVID is not dangerous. The problem is the comorbidities. So, of course, we need, and the governments need to pay an special attention to the old age homes, to the places where there is extreme vulnerability in terms of health, but all the others, children's schools, and until the 50s and so on, everyone should be together, because there are already evidence and articles published showing that outside COVID, the number of deaths is 5 times superior than COVID's. And also in Portugal, there was evidence with article papers showing that not only outside COVID, deaths are 5 times higher than also comparing from previous years. So this is generating a chaos. People is afraid, everyone is blocked, and the situations can be dramatic. So I think, again, there is not a single truth, but I think the way on, and it's not a paper, it's not evidence-based, but 3 days ago in our main channel at TV, a great jurist and a judge, an international judge, show the comparison from the months where Portugal was under lockdown and outside lockdown, and no difference at all. So I think there is a lot to be studied, and a lot and an extremely need to look for the numbers we already have and not going, because I think the major danger, as it was already said, is this pandemic of information, maybe not so much the COVID. And
Yes.
We have moved the nation into directions that are not sustainable in terms of society, in terms of economy, and so on. So,
okay, so that's
this
right,
is-
because a lot of misinformation, disinformation, sensationalizing, what the media has been providing, that's also a very big problem now in this pandemic. And WHO has repeatedly said, please do not spread fake news and do not, listen to all this misinformation, disinformation. So that is a problem. Now, I just want to take a last question. I want to discuss a last question, because there are lots of issues that we need to discuss, but it's not possible. So I will take the issues of drugs and the vaccines. Okay. So there is currently the Solidarity trial that is going on with 4 drugs. And of the 4 drugs, now hydroxychloroquine is out. Remdesivir, as of 2 days ago, has shown to be not effective. So remdesivir is out. And now they're looking in terms of immunotherapy and immunomodulators. These are the things which can give us hope. The other thing is the question of vaccines. Now we have at least about 200 vaccines that are there in the market. Each one its own versions of it, but none of the vaccines are covering the age group below 12 and above 55. Okay, so now we are going to get vaccines. I'm not sure if it's 55 or 65. I think it's 55. Now we are going to get vaccines which are only available for age groups between 12 to 55. What happens to the others? That is one. What about countries that are hoarding vaccines and hoarding medications? What do we do about it? What happens? See, the Solidarity trial, one of the objections to the Solidarity trial was that all the well-developed countries were in the trial except, I think it was Latin America and it was Africa. Why
Asia
were
also, I think
Asia,
the short is Asia.
yeah. So why were they all excluded from the study? So Baroness Finlay, can I address? I mean, will everyone can answer, of course, but may I start with you regarding the issues of the solidarity trial and the issues of vaccine?
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you for a very interesting discussion so far. I think in terms of the trial, first of all, I really don't understand why anybody would be excluded. It would seem much more important to be inclusive and then look at the data. And even if there are flaws in the data, do sub-analyses, because you can get the numbers, much larger numbers for a start. In terms of vaccines, I think they are being trialed on younger people, but of course, the people most at risk of dying are the ones in the over 55 age group.
Yes.
And they're also the people, as has already been said, who are now dying of other diseases which aren't being treated because so many resources have been taken up by COVID. So there's this balance in the distribution, and if you could say justice, the principle of justice, which is the fair allocation of resources. In terms of across the world, I really do worry that the selfishness and the insular nature of the richer governments of the world are going to emerge. And within those, the richer people in society, the richer strata in society, and they will get vaccinated. We don't know whether the vaccine will really be effective in the long term. We don't know actually what the side effect profile and adverse response will be in the long term across the whole population. But my big worry is that this will widen social divide. And when you widen social divide, you increase civil unrest, and you increase, at the end of the day, the risk of civil uprising, insurgency, and potentially civil war in different countries. And so I just think that we must not forget the effect of widening rather than narrowing economic opportunity across the world. And unfortunately, it is terribly wide now.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Baroness Finlay. May I go to Dr. Ved Prakash? Professor, the issues of vaccine and the issues of the solidarity trial where, some of the countries are out, or not out, or rather they were never let in.
No, Professor Mary, it is really unfortunate, and I will go to the extent of saying that perhaps the two world wars that the humanity faced and the human charters that got generated out of it, and the one which we are talking today, is really a continuum of 1948 UNO Charter and 2005 UNESCO Charter. All these then turn out to be exercises in futility if they have not been able to open the wise eyes of human beings in the name and interest of humanity. Therefore, any exclusion of any type, take it for granted, is a slur in the name of humanity and humanism. All humans have to be put across onto the pedestal of equity and dignity is the basic hallmark that all that we are wanting to be discussing and focusing. And therefore, any exclusion for any rhyme or reason, A, is untenable, is impermissible, and therefore it is not only unethical, but it is inhuman. And pardon me if I say, it is a sin which is committed against humanity. Having said so, there will be limitations that when we are talking of the vaccination as of now and the vaccine that we will be going to generate. But again, as very rightly you have tried to focus that finally, it is the inequity which plagues the world. And it is this inequity of resources, inequity of economics, inequity of social determinants of health, and inequity of the sizes of the economy and the catastrophe that the present pandemic has put across different countries into. Again, the most perilous part will be inequity at its worst, Nadir. And that inequity, until and unless the ethical concerns of the people that be, they come into operation, believe me, the widening gap that we are going to face will not only be absolutely a huge divide, but it will be a divide which is perhaps, again, slapping on the face of humanity and mankind. And therefore, we need to be very conscious. Is it not a fact, Professor Mary, that having learned our own lessons, we worked out globally a consensus, what we called as global peacekeeping force for the purposes of tranquility and equity? Why should it not be imperative on part of the global leaders as a whole independent of their sizes of economy, independent of their resources at their disposal. Ultimately, it is not the nation getting divided by virtue of the boundaries. It is the planet Earth which is expected to be sustaining human beings in the name of humanity and humanism. Therefore, pooling of the global resources with a monitoring mechanism in terms of a humanistic consensus perhaps is the answer, which should be a real pragmatic approach that the wisdom of men and mankind should be able to invoke on. And hence, it would be imperative for us to ensure that this is the message which we are able to put it out, that it is not the segmented boundaries within which the men and mankind are to be saved, but it is beyond boundaries and beyond frontiers of any demarcation, that ultimately it is the sustenance of humanism through human beings and catering to their requirement. And therefore, I personally feel that it would be imperative that we think in terms of a global health-keeping force at this juncture for not only tiding over the present requirement, but for the entire futuristic requirements that they would be definitely raising their ugly head time and again. That is exactly my submission, which I would like to make from my side. Thank you very much.
That's a very interesting thought, health-keeping force. I mean, we are used to peacekeeping force, but I think it's time now we think about those on those lines too. Thank you very much, Professor Witt. Professor Joe, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to comment on what we've been discussing?
Well,
Joe,
thank you.
You were just talking of solidarity. I just saw what you wrote.
Right. So the issue of divisiveness keeps coming up, and that's part of the issue between lockdown or different strategies. And we need a commitment to solidarity, which some people are definitely committed to oppose. So we have to strive by reason and engagement to convert the people who may be amenable to that. The more that people can just be engaged in the battle between one issue versus the other, the more we lose them to engagement and problem solving. So that affects us locally, certainly affects us globally. And it's really a core issue for us to deal with. And again, that's where the UNESCO process is so important, because we emphasize the importance of ethics in everyday life. It's not a specialty for the experts, but it's for something that each of us, certainly healthcare professionals, have to learn about, have to engage, and have to practice. So I'm proud to be part of this group and in this endeavor.
Thank you, Professor Joe. Thank you. Professor Effa? Professor, I have, yes. Professor, your contribution to the, for the discussion we are holding regarding, holding of vaccines and low-income countries not being included in the trials.
Well, the way we are concerned by vaccine, the first thing is the access.
Access, yes.
When will we ready? Of course, some African countries are involved in trials.
Yes.
Of trials. And we hope that the negotiations that African leaders are making to have access to vaccine in affordable conditions will be a success. But at this step, a huge problem is that this pandemic is a problem for the whole humanity. And how can we have 200 candidate vaccine spread all over the world? Each pharmaceutical firm struggling to have its own, each country struggling to have its own. Why is not difficult? it's not impossible to have a global team committed to have a vaccine, a safe one, in due time to face the COVID-19. Why is it impossible? That's a huge question.
Yes, that's true. I totally agree with you, Professor Effa. Why is it that we don't have a global team to form the vaccine, and why is each country going on its own? We know the reasons for that. We know the whichever country that comes in first is the winner and will make back all the money. We know that. This is where the problem is.
That's part of the economy,
Is it a matter
rebuilding
of
the economy.
business?
Sorry?
Is it a matter of business or a matter of saving lives?
Yes.
And saving humanity?
That's a question we have to ask. Thank you, Professor Effa. Professor Shaylin, your contribution to the conversation, to the discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. I think it was a fantastic discussion, and I really agree to what was said by previously, even by Voin and by Professor Misbra and Finlay. It is an issue. We need to have both equity and equality of distributing the vaccine. However, I might mention that similar consideration should be taken with the treatment. I'm not sure that even if we had a good treatment, it would be available to everybody. So not only vaccine, but also the treatment is very critical. Another comment is that remdesivir is, I'm not sure about the conclusion at the Solidarity trial. It just came out. And I'm not sure there was a correct balance. Go ahead.
The conclusion, Professor Shaylin, is that hydroxychloroquine is not found to be effective. Remdesivir is also not found to be effective. Even the anti-HIV drug, which was tried, that is also not effective. So right now we are left with immunomodulators or immunotherapy. These are the ones that we are left with right now.
Yeah, I read the conclusion at the WHO site. The remdesivir trial didn't make the distinction, I think, between very seriously sick people at a very serious condition and people who are less serious condition. And that might not be answered by the trial because it wasn't designed like this. Okay. So I think we are still open on the remdesivir. I'm not sure. But
WHO has already said it day before yesterday.
Yeah,
WHO has already said it, that it's
that's
not.
right.
Yeah, it's out.
That's right. It just yes, that's right. So we need to think of equality and equity, of course, of treatment and vaccine. And I may offer to look at what Johns Hopkins Center suggested that there be at least two tiers of vaccine allocations. Like medical staff would be the first, the elderly people would be the first, the people who are more dangerous would be the first, and then we go to other tiers of allocation to the general public. So that would be, of course, general across the countries and continents and societies. And I would like just to raise the question, which is kind of the mirror image of it. Would we have to impose a compulsory treatment and compulsory vaccines once we have them? I don't know. I mean, it's an ethically complicated question, but because of the common good, should we make everybody take a vaccine or treatment if there would be one? So far, we don't have the vaccine and the treatment, so we don't have to answer these questions.
Yeah, Professor Shaylin, the problem with the vaccine right now is each country has its own different versions of the vaccine. Some are using live, some are using killed, some are using the spikes, and it has its own complications by itself. So we don't know whichever vaccine comes out first, whether it's useful for everybody. Now, yesterday, if you listen to the WHO briefing, Soumya Swaminathan, the scientist for WHO, she said, we are not going to get a vaccine at the end of this year or at the beginning of the year. We may get a limited amount of vaccine, maybe by June or July of next year. But for the young population, it will only be 2022. And the people who they have prioritized right now are the health care workers and the people who need it most.
Vulnerable.
Yeah, the vulnerable people. So this is where the vaccines start. But my question is, there are nations who have already, it's called a vaccine nationalism, where they started hoarding the vaccine. USA and China has already started this. So this is where the problem comes. When we talk about equity, equality, this is the problem. And like one of our speakers said, UNESCO has a big role to play in these kind of problems, where we bring together, people of like-minded people and bring in solidarity, because the pandemic is not the time when we should be divided. We should be united. So unfortunately, it has swung the wrong way. It has divided nations. So that is the problem that we're facing now. Professor.
Mary, 1 minute. Can I pose a question? Since you're talking about this, just for Shaylin and for the others, Joe, the Oxford AstraZeneca trial, and maybe also Ilona, Baroness Finlay, yes, they have restarted the study. It was stopped with the transverse. They have restarted it in all the countries, which I think India too is in that. But the only country they've not started it is USA. So they've stopped it in USA, but all the other countries it's started. I was just wondering, one, there are a number of questions there from an ethical perspective, but why? That's anyone, any thoughts about that?
It's open to all.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't have enough details to comment.
Yeah, I just read, we were discussing this at the WMA meeting. The AstraZeneca Oxford study, it was stopped for transverse myelitis, then it started again, and now it started in all the, wherever the 30,000, but not in USA, all the rest of the world they're doing it.
I can only speculate. Maybe they're afraid that the criteria for review is more stringent here. And for a drug company to invest in the development of a drug, they want to avoid controversy and delays. So that might be one reason to avoid it here.
Of course, it's UK, Europe, isn't it? AstraZeneca, Oxford.
Something to say, yeah.
Yeah, I thank you. I think it's very interesting, and I don't know the answer. This is purely speculative, but I wonder if there is a concern over settlements, financial settlements, and financial risk for them, and they've weighed up that the financial risk is too high. I can't help feeling that it will be tied up with money rather than with processes, or rather than scientific type processes or analysis or data collection. But I think that also raises another very interesting issue, which is when people go into a trial of a vaccine, their informed consent requires that they are aware of the potential problems. And of course, we don't know whether the transverse myelitis was due to the vaccine, or whether it was a coincidental event, or whether it was that the vaccine and the response brought forward in time an event that was going to happen anyway. So I mean, I don't know, but I would very much doubt that there is extensive MRI scanning of the neurological system of every volunteer going into the vaccine trials. That would just be prohibitively expensive. So you just really don't know. And I worry too that actually, when you get one incident, you have to think, is this the beginning of several, or is it a one-off? And that's a difficult assessment. So I would purely speculate that finance may be driving this.
one of the difficulties is, of course, that until the numbers are up in these studies, we won't get the data. And personally, as I said before, I think that we should be opening recruitment to older people, because it will be older people who will be accessing the vaccine.
You're right.
Thank you, Professor Laura.
That's one of the issues in sharing the benefits and the risk burdens of equity in research here.
Yeah, I'd just like all the other panelists who haven't had an opportunity to comment on this about vaccines and drugs to come in. Professor Moti, would you like to contribute to this? And probably with that, we can, we can hold on the discussion. Professor Moti?
Yes. First, I want to propose, if you saw a movie that the name is Contagion, it was a movie that was done more or less 6 years before the pandemic of the COVID, and there we see what happened to the population. It made how the fantasy of the artist people can imagine what will happen. And one of the things that they show is the way that people behave when the vaccine appear, and how the Committee of Health they deal with the vaccine. When was the HIV in the world that spread, only one decision of a politician that was Carl Clinton, he decided to lower the price of the vaccine of the treatment in Africa, and that was the way that they stopped the that was spreading. I work in this issue to spread the problem of HIV. What I want to say is, who is the population that we as bioethics people have to work? And I think that we have to work also with those politicians that decide in which way the vaccine will be spread to all the population. Not only to say equity, I don't believe in equality, I believe only in equity. To say equity, we can say it because we have a very good heart and good intentions, but the way that we have to work, it's in Hebrew you say tachlis. That's meaning which way you put things that you can influence those people that they have to decide the way that the vaccine will be spread. Will be, this is what I said, that the third situation will start when the population will be very, very angry about what is happening in this, the second situation. That means that we have to be conscious in which way our issue that has to be treated, and which will be the population that we have to work with here. This is my own position.
Thank you, Professor Moti. Professor Rui? Professor Rui, you can unmute yourself. I've sent you a request, yes.
Yes, Professor Pierre Effa asked a few moments ago, why are there more than 200 vaccines? And I feel that's the real issue, namely that after World War II, research and development of new pharmaceuticals is performed mainly by private corporations. I have no problem with that, but that has consequences. One of them is that the prices are very high. A study by Forbes a few years ago stated that only one pharmaceutical at the United States had a net cost of $13 billion. So the prices are probably exaggerated for many different reasons. But the consequence is that private corporations compete with themselves. And when we speak today of pharmaceutical or vaccine nationalism, well, the problem is more deeper, because in the end, they are mainly private corporations that are dealing with this issue. So I think that we should at least have a positive consequence of this pandemic, that is to search for new solutions. And as I stated earlier, I would like to see new global governance arrangements in many different issues, like the climate or the weather or the water, but specifically also in health, in science. And so WHO and UNESCO should have a much stronger role in the future in these issues. Just to finish, to say that at least at the European level, we have the excellent news from our European Commission and from the President of the European Commission that we will start to build in this line of reasoning an European Union for health in the next years and decades, so that the European Union as a group of independent states, 27 independent states, these states come together to deal with this issue. It's not a global solution, but nevertheless, it is a very, very important step, so that we can at European level at least have a strategic reserve of pharmaceuticals, so that we are not hostage of foreign countries. We have more intense research regarding disease control and prevention, and also very important to deeper the interoperability and the interconnection of the digital systems of all 27 European states, so that in the future we can build this huge health service system in all European Union that I think that will deal with most of the issues that we are speaking right now.
Thank you, Professor Rui. Thank you. Professor Wochin? Professor Wochin, I've sent a request for you to unmute yourself.
Yes, yeah. I unmuted myself.
Yes, Professor.
Well, in this case, I do not have a clear stance. I have to admit what Professor Nunes said is indeed true, that if private companies are developing the vaccine, then the prices will of course be higher, but and of course that can lead to obvious misfortunes for huge portions of the global population. I do not know what the alternative is, however, because if we leave it only to state companies, we also will arrive nowhere. Perhaps to leave it to the private companies or to all companies, because that is the primary goal, to develop a vaccine, and then to adopt a multilateral agreement, or I have no idea how that can be done technically, but to have an agreement that that there will be a price for the vaccine that is available to all human, that makes it available to all human beings, because it would be obviously unethical if richer people would be spared and poorer people would not be spared of disease and death. On the other hand, we have that situation already with many diseases, not to mention them. So poor people, of course, have more trouble being put in a state of chronic disease in the case of AIDS or many other diseases. So the issue of equality is an issue that is broader than the issue of the COVID-19 vaccine. So my tentative proposal or idea would be to let all those who are capable of developing a vaccine develop it and address issues of equality at a different level, because that is the COVID-19 vaccine to be is only one of the symptoms through which inequality can be manifested. So the issue of equality and equality is an ethical, it's a philosophical issue that is independent from the COVID-19 vaccine. The COVID-19 vaccine is can be an ethical, can have ethical consequences, the basis of which are the issues of equality. But the COVID-19 vaccine cannot be something separate. I cannot see how that can be made feasible in comparison with other issues pertaining to equality. Did I complicate it too much?
Yes, but that's okay. It's okay, but you helped us also go through what.
Right, I should have shortened the whole speech. So
no, that's okay, that's fine.
Equality, yes, but at a broader level than the COVID-19 vaccine only. So that is the substance.
Thank you, Professor Vajit. I think Professor Madlena, after we'd like you to say something after that. Professor Shailen, I'll give you a chance to talk about the COVAX vaccine in WHO. Madlena, can you unmute it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm unmuted. And thanks very much for let me just say I have nothing too much things to add relating to what was said in terms of equity and so on. But anyway, at the end of this fantastic webinar, I would like to say a word on medical education, because everything that concerns the decisions for vaccines, therapeutics, and so on, and the inequality of countries and so on, forced humanity to take ethical decisions. And my question is, if at the same time we are paying so much attention to the health dramatic challenges we are facing, we are also teaching bioethics in the way we need to. And if we are using all opportunities to train our future doctors to know what they have to do, if we look back to the decision from Samuel Gorodzic on bioethics, he defined bioethics as the critical examination of the moral dimensions of decision-making in a health-related context and in context involving the biological sciences. So I think we have on our shoulder not all the drama and the challenges, the health challenge, but also this need for an effort to educate our future doctors to a third level of the dimensions proposed by the Lancet report, when he said that we need to create future agents for society change. We need to train our students for these enormous responsibilities and the residents that are now in place and so on. So just a word on the importance of bioethics teaching at the end of this webinar.
Yeah, I think we would have loved to take that, because that was part of Dr. Daniela's talk. But we really don't have time. I just want Professor Shailen also to
The
brief
COVAX.
audience about the COVAX vaccine, please?
Thank you very much. I really just wanted to draw the attention to the discussion that the very important, I think, facility operation of the WHO, the COVAX facility, and we might pay attention to this. And hopefully that will help to distribute vaccinations throughout the world in a logical matter. This is one thing that I think we should support. The other thing is, it's very good news, as Professor Nuno said, that the European Union would have now a leadership role, and they could really, the European Union countries could really lead to make the world better and lead to equality and equity. I think there's no other power in the world right now that can take this role.
Saying that, Shailene, the Australia has given 150 million for the COVAX, and they have stated that they will share, that they made a pledge that they will share whatever they have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I might suggest that I know that this session is right now recorded. It's wonderful. The other meeting were also recorded. And I think it's very important to put it into the chair with Professor Karmi approval, of course, on the chair side, because this is, as has just been mentioned, very important, as Madalena said, for educational material to everyone to access this meeting and previous meetings.
Thank you, Professor Shailene. We'll do that. And shall we give an opportunity to our other participants if they want to ask questions?
I was going to ask Derek. Is there any one in the chat who want to ask questions?
If our panelists are not too tired, if it's okay, we'll just take one or two questions, please.
Yeah, if there's anyone in the participants who want to give a comment or ask questions.
Madam Geeta Lakshmi wanted.
Yes, Dr. Geeta Lakshmi, do you want to?
Madam, I've requested you to unmute yourself.
Professor, Dr. Geeta Lakshmi is the Vice Chancellor. Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. Very nice to be, very interesting topic about the vaccine. And so today, I would like to say that the ICMR, the National Institute of Virology, Priya Abraham has told that she would come out with the vaccine in 2021 April, but not told the details. This is what which comes under the ICMR. So she, National Institute of Virology, Pune. So she has said that it would come in April, but the details of it she hasn't mentioned.
ICMR is the Indian Council for Medical Research, who is coordinating the vaccine research. Anyone else? Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. Anyone?
Can I ask Amron? Are you able to?
Are you able to
talk?
Professor Kami?
Professor Kami? Are you able to? Have you been able to sort out your audio? Can you say a few words?
I think he can't. I've sent a request to unmute. Will you be able to unmute Professor Kami? No? Okay.
In between, I think he
maybe I saw it unmuted, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Can we take one more question and then hopefully we can call it, if it's okay? It's okay. Is there any other question that anyone would like?
There was a comment from Dr. Girish where he gave the example of Taiwan, saying that they had closed their borders early, and despite their geographical proximity to China, with simple hand washing, use of masks, and increasing public awareness, they were able to keep their cases to less than 500.
Yeah, so
any of the panelists would like to just comment on that?
Because I'll just like to take that, and because Taiwan, we had a panelist actually initially in one of our webinars, the early webinars. Taiwan, even though they were very close to China, they had the experience of the SARS pandemic. So they had learned lessons from the pandemic. And this time they had decided that the care will be for the elderly first, because they were confident that the younger population will be able to take care of them. So they had policies and they had taken decisions already in advance. And that is how they were able to, they closed their borders first and they were able to contain the virus. Dr. Russell,
Mary, there was one more question, one more issue.
Yes.
Daniel was our Daniel from UNESCO. He was the one who spoke at our meeting. But one of the important things that came out from that was, one, on the 29th of December itself, they said it was a pandemic. No, and WHO, no one listened to them because I presume from the political point, but they were the first on the 29th of December, they made that. And the other one was not only the experience of SARS, but they had tremendous trust. The public are fully geared up with the government because they are in all the time in fear, and so they were disciplined, very, very disciplined in what they did, and that there was a tremendous fight. They talk about this trust in a time like this. Yes, that's right. So I think that was.
Baroness Finlay, you want to say something?
Yes, I did. And Russell, thank you for bringing those points out, because I think they're very important. It was just to put this a little bit in perspective. The other day, I came across a book written 154 years ago called Epidemics, A Guide for the Public. And in it, it stressed that the most important thing is what we still know today: keeping a distance, hygiene, isolating pockets of infection from other people. And actually what we saw in Taiwan was immediate public health hygiene measures implemented, which were the most important. And what we have seen in other countries has been a failure of those basic bits of infection control, in that the most important things still seem to be keeping a social distance, wearing a mask because it cuts down viral transmission and it also cuts down inhaled viral load, and hand washing, using old-fashioned soap and water. And I think that, when you think about some of the slum areas in the world, people are all together, they don't have adequate clean water, they don't have enough soap, they don't have simple things like reusable masks. We don't need disposable masks. We need masks that can be reused time and time again. And actually, I worry that in all of this, we stress as if a vaccine is going to be the answer, when going back hundreds of years, people have always known that the basic hygiene principles are the things that will break the cycle of any epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Baroness Finlay. And another thing which 2 days ago WHO has stressed is that they have stopped using the term social distancing. So now they're calling it physical distancing and not social distancing. So I think we should, yes, the new word or the phrase is physical distancing now. I think, Daniela, you want to say something? Dr. Girish, one moment after Dr. Daniela.
No, I will finish that. Give him and I will say something.
You want to finish? Okay, Dr. Girish, you can go ahead.
Yes, in fact, exactly as what Dr. Derek and Dr. Mary had said, that, I had conducted almost around 50 to 60 awareness programs online as far as the corona is concerned, stressing on 3 important aspects: the mask, hand hygiene, and the physical distance. Now, this has got to be instituted with discipline. If this doesn't occur in the society, you will find automatically the diseases will go up. And that's what UK is facing now, where they're going for a second pandemic, and they are stressing only on these 3 aspects. Now, the example that I have cited is Taiwan. Taiwan, which is very, very close to China, just how like Sri Lanka is to India. They started it right from Jan, cancel all the flights from Wuhan, and they saw to it that the mask, hand hygiene, and social distance had been instituted. There was no lockdown, no closing of schools, no closing of any clinical establishments or business establishments, and they are able to maintain even now a number of less than 500. If they can do it, why not we? It's only a question of inculcating a sort of a self-discipline in the society. Each one of us should feel, yes, this is essential and nothing else we do have. Like you don't have a vaccine and we do not have an efficient medicine too, as things stand now. They have gone one more extent. That is 17 million masks they have made and exported to the countries in the as early as March or April, when people were struggling to get a mask. So that's it. So that's a class example where I think we can follow. And exactly as Finlay was telling, a sort of self-discipline going back to earlier days, 1 or 2 years ago, where we had the Spanish flu. Same thing only was said, mask and social distance. Thank you. MHS, mask, hand hygiene, and social distance. That is the MHS formula.
Thank you, Dr. Girish. Okay, Daniela, your last words in this
Yes,
webinar.
thank you very much. I just want to I begin with benefit and harm, and just that we all go a little bit smiling. We are so, so, what is relativism in benefit and harm? Two men discuss between them what is good for life. So one man said to the other, what is good to be optimistic, because when you're optimistic, we know the researchers said that you will live 10 years longer. So the other answer, 10 years longer, this is a benefit, I'm married, okay? So it is so relatively what is benefit and harm, and so wide issue. But as Madlena said, to really teach the student, the medical students, to think about it, to feel about it, and to be flexible, and that they have the chance to really change their mind whenever it is needed. I just want to say thank you very much to the excellent discussion and meeting. I enjoyed very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniela. And I think Daniela wants to leave us all in a positive note. But remember, it was the optimist who made the aeroplane and the pessimist who made the parachute. So we need both. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. I thank all my panelists, and Professor Kami, thank you very much for joining us. It's unfortunate that you couldn't speak, but we shall let you rest also.
Professor Kami, just try once. He appears.
I think Professor Kami can talk now. You are unmuted.
Can you try? Can you say something so that we know that it's working? I think it's the audio.
No, it's the audio.
Just try
it's not.
speaking, Professor Kami.
The audio, it's the computer audio. It's the problem.
Okay. I'll hand it back to Dr. Russell. Dr. Russell, over to you.
Yeah, okay. I think it's been a great meeting today. This is the World Bioethics Day. I'm delighted that even though you didn't say you were prevented from saying anything, your presence here has been very important. I did write to and I did send a note to Amnon asking him to join us. I'm glad that you have joined us, and I want to thank this excellent panel, but I also want to thank Dr. Princey and the medical students, or the bioethics. We have got the student wing, and they performed for a different way, expressing the art, using art as an expression of the ethical requirement, or the Article 4. So that was important, and of course to Daniela for her presentation, but very importantly to this panel, certainly our moderator, Dr. Mary, and Dr. Derek. As you know, this is the 27th webinar we've been having, the Department of Education. I'm delighted Dr. Baroness Milora has been in many, Geeta, most of you have all taken part in Moti, have all taken part, with Prakash and so forth, in many of these webinars, which, and for Shailin to tell you, we have recorded them, and I think we will put it, but we have Bioethicon, one of our website has got not just the recording, but we have with us, where is it? We have Professor Des Cahill. He was just here. He writes, he's a professor from our Melbourne unit, and he writes a summary. He's a professor from RMIT. So he produces an executive summary, a brief summary for those who want to read it. So we put both of those up on a website, but we should give it, get it put to our website, the other website with Daniel. I think we should do that. Anyhow, I want to thank all of you, and I'm delighted that all here are members of one way of the education. They've all contributed. And I think Madalena talked about education. We are doing, we have, in fact, all of you are, I think, Shailin, you've got a class to take. I saw a note, even though you're in Canada, you're still, I think, due to take one of the courses that we ran. So the Department of Education is doing this, and we have more than 800 faculty have completed courses with all of you. All of you here, Wochin, Irui, all of you are taking these classes, and so we are doing our job. And Ilana Belmaker, she's also part of our team. So I have a very round the world team that's taking part with our education department, and so we're very glad to have all of you here. And this is a memorial. I think it's very good that we've had the World Bioethics Day. This is probably the first time we've brought everyone, and we have Amanon also with us, all on the same day, and that I think is a great great achievement. Shailin, don't you think this is so? We're seeing all of us. You're in Canada, I'm in Australia. You're on top of the world, I'm under the world. Okay, and we have the rest in between, and yet we are all here, and we are demonstrating Article 13, solidarity and cooperation. That's what this is all about in our World Bioethics Day, and in our program every. Usually we've been doing it, and we have a few more to go, running the Sunday panel discussion webinars from around the world. So once again, I want to thank the moderator, Mary, and also Derek, who have been, he looks after the chat box, the questions, and those who bring them on to ask the questions here. So I will now, I think we've had, I want to thank you all for taking so much time, so much of energy. I know for me, it's already coming to Monday.
So you're already on World Bioethics Day.
Yeah, I've brought in World Bioethics Day in Australia. It's 1:30 in the morning now. So we've crossed over, and all of you have the rest. You enjoy the rest of Sunday, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of Monday. So we have a big program tomorrow.
Also to you, Russell, our thanks of all this organization that was so good. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and have a nice, sleep well.